Okay. Ineke, hi.
Hello.
Good afternoon, good morning, everybody, wherever you are, and welcome to our second webinar taken from Ineke's book, Your Phone, My Life. And we're focusing on another aspect of our challenging world, again, as I say, based on Ineke's book. And this webinar today is about management challenges in the digitalized world. Before we get into the meat of it, I'd just like to say a brief thank you to everybody who joined us last time, and I hope you find this webinar as useful as the last one, and also to say thank you to everybody who sent in questions and also posted comments on the website. It's all useful web feedback and helps us to improve our subsequent webinars. So thank you, everybody, and welcome. So, Ineke, we both had an experience of actually, I was thinking about this yesterday. We've been very privileged, I think, in the time when we have been working within the telecommunications world, where we've gone from very antiquated systems to today's, I was going to say very sophisticated systems, but who knows how far that will develop. So we have seen massive change. And I'm interested from your book and also from the structure of this webinar that you have in fact started to look at people, which may not be that evident. I think given the amount of emphasis on technology today, the lead-in that you've chosen is actually people and business processes. Excuse me, reversing the order of the slide. Perhaps you'd just like to explore some of the journey that you've been on from the early days up to now, really.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Gavin, for the question. Basically, if I look back, then, initially we were so busy building that a lot of the things were fully dependent on people. And that is of course, that's the most important thing. People will do the work, people will accomplish the task, people will make sure that we can launch our operations. But in that haste and that hurry and under that huge pressure, quite often it was not fully documented. And I think that one of the first things later on, when we started to reorganize and restructure companies, was to have a look at that. Because, of course, people are your most important assets. Yeah. But if someone drops out of that chain of actions, then you need to be sure that you have captured that in business processes. Now, that is where, let's say, computerized systems are coming in, because you have to document those processes. And it will give the company security, because if there's only one person, for example, who knows a particular task, that is unhealthy, because if that someone drops under the bus or can't work anymore, let's do it a bit softer, then you are totally dependent on what the other people know, and you have a break in the chain. So business processes are very helpful, not only for the company to make sure that everything is mapped and that there's logic, because automatically we will see logic appearing, but it's also important that newcomers in the company have a reference and have a better starting point. It also gives you the opportunity to look at everyone. Is the person in the right place? Because if it turns out that a particular role in that process is not exactly for that person, you're much easier for you to change and to optimize the organization and put the person somewhere else who is more suitable and get someone else to do the job at hand. So I think business processes are the reflection of what we do. And the best thing to do is, of course, to capture them in a very good document control system, process system.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think what is interesting is as things have progressed, the less involvement of the people and the more involvement of computers and the digitalization of processes, the documentation of those processes become actually increasingly important. So totally agree with that. And I think it would be, if we look at some of the areas of digitalization itself, I mean, perhaps you would like to start off by describing the start point with ancient exchanges and billing systems that that you started with, because a lot of people, I think, will be familiar with that. Well, there'll be a lot of people who aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anywhere where there is a transaction, either it's energy or it is telecommunications or it's a bank, or there is a system that processes the bills. And of course, initially these systems, and I think we put up a picture at one of the posts as well, you know, they were agents and they had meters, and you had to take pictures of those meters, and then those pictures had to be manually inputted into the system, and then the system would hopefully spit out a bill. Now, the accuracy of that is sometimes doubtful, of course, because there's a lot of steps to be taken. But not only that, I think it's also very important to realize that is a possibility for people who are not, let's say, straight, to intervene and to manipulate the system. So that is definitely something you need to have a look at. It is, by the way, a very complicated system, and more so, because initially we could only do, for example, one tariff, and to introduce a new tariff took weeks to write the software, and then you could launch it, etc. Today, with the competition, and that is very fierce in all areas of business, you have to be able to change that always on an ongoing basis. You need to be able to react. So the systems are getting very complicated. But the positive side of it is that there is not so much boring, anyway, manual work connected to those systems any longer.
No, that's true. And also, we'll come back to this maybe a little bit later, but you made a comment about people who maybe are not straight. But as part of the people process, we do need to recognize, particularly in some of the areas where you've worked, that some of the competing pressures on people are enormous. And it's not necessarily a question of being straight or fraudulent. There are other aspects of it.
Of course, peer pressure and need, is
yeah, absolutely. You made a very good comment. You know, need doesn't disappear. Need is always there. You've got to eat. And that's sorry.
And as I said in the book, an empty stomach doesn't have a strategy. It needs to be filled. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's it's realistic, of course. So if you see that there is manipulation, and that manipulation can stem from all kinds of reasons, then the first thing to do is to have a look at how you can support, if it is not malicious, but if it's pure need. There might be other ways to support the people and to find alternatives for them that don't jeopardize the interest of the company.
Exactly. And as you say, our most important asset in business is our people. And I think that even today, that still remains the same. And I think that will remain the same for the foreseeable future. So,
yes. Yeah.
Sorry, I just think a question's come in, but I can't see it. Anyway, so the process that we're describing, I think that you have been involved in a large number of startups. So you have been in a position where you're starting with a clean sheet of paper. But the question of digitalization is relentless. So whether you're doing a startup or you are improving the performance of a business, the questions to be answered remain the same. And the importance of digitizing routine tasks, you started to explain the necessity of doing that to remove the opportunity, whether it's deliberate or not, to get things wrong in the billing system, for example, becomes even more important. So in terms of digitizing, mapping, I think we probably agree that the billing system is the most important. But where do you follow on from there?
Well, I think the billing system is definitely, because that is basically it represents your revenue, right?
Exactly.
In short. So your billing system doesn't work, then the company is really in a very bad situation. But it is not only the billing system, of course. There are other things that could and should be digitized as well. As we mentioned already, your business processes. So that can be a process of, how do I put a new customer into the customer care system, for example, or how do I tick all the boxes so that they have all the correct services that they need and want and pay for. And so it goes throughout the company. It also goes in the situation of you have to procure something. Well, there needs to be a process, because again, if there's not a process in place that we can follow step by step, an international procurement process in our business is very, very key to make sure that the interests of the company are protected. And these processes have to be mapped. And I already said there are systems for that, the business process document control systems to do so. And I think that what you see is that more, even at the beginning, as we were building those networks, and any company who starts, it's hard for people because their interest is somewhere else. They want to launch ASAP, yeah, and they forget sometimes that they have to build the foundation of the company as well. And what does that mean? That means that you, from the start onwards, make sure that the business's processes are described, digitized, that you have control over the contracts that you conclude, because this could be an enormous number of them in the end, and that you build it up alongside with the company. But as I say, in haste, it is quite difficult. So there are specialists in this world, and I went to one operation where there was nothing done. I mean, nothing. I didn't see anything. Maybe it was hidden somewhere, but it was not done. And what you get then is that people are totally dependent on people. As I said already, if one pops out of the chain, you have a huge problem. So the first thing I did was to put a group of like 8 people in place who could start mapping these processes. And that involves every process in the company. So it's a 3D, it comes from all different angles, but the 3D system that looks from sales, from marketing, from procurement, from technical, from every angle. And that makes it very clear, yeah, because then these processes are there for the people. And I think more and more this will be also the basis later on for artificial intelligence, actually, because these processes will be inputs to next steps in digitization.
Yeah, I think the part of the interesting challenge to me, we've got a question here from Krasimir saying, what is the biggest challenge on people or costs or the right technology? So hopefully in the course of this webinar, we shall answer all of those questions. But I think that part of the interest for me is the control of the development of the company, and how can you use digitalization or automation to assist that? So what I'm talking about really is new markets, market segmentation, tariff packages, adding customers. All of these things are essential parts of business. So
Absolutely.
how do you see we can assist ourselves, if you like, to improve our reaction to some of these things?
Well, I think that if we look at those systems and those needs from customers and employees and all the stakeholders actually, and they are, processes are laid down and they're digitized, etc. Then the next step, of course, is to make sure that they're implemented and followed through. Yeah. So I think that whatever, even if you now take it one step further in the future with artificial intelligence that I just said, the most important thing is that rubbish in is rubbish out. That's very clear. So you need to have a group of people who have a very expert, the best look that they can have on what is being produced, and is this the foundation of a proper process that will work in the long term, but not only work in the long term, but you can also build upon in the future. And for that, you will need to have people who are not only doing that at the beginning, if this is all in place, but follow through. So I always want to have a group that is operational audit. And it is extremely important because you are working in technology. That means that almost anything to do is digitized. And so it goes from the switch that spits out all the data records that goes in the media gateway, they are processed and they are going to the billing system, and they are also input for your information. And the information needs to be correct because you need to be able to say to any financial auditor in this case, this is my revenue and I can vouch for that. And you also need that, of course, to trace if something goes wrong in the whole sequence of events. And it was and is a known fact that mobile operators are losing 4 to 5% of their revenue simply because systems are not 100% okay, because there are mistakes in the software, because there are all kinds of reasons. Now, in order to make sure, and the same, I'm quite sure the same goes for any, let's say an energy company, utility companies, water, whatever you have, it's the same thing. The usage should be reflected in records. Those records need to be read, and that produces a bill to your customer. In order to make sure that this is a seamless flow, as seamless as you can, you need auditors. Financial auditors, of course, for the financial results and also the underlying processes for that, but the operational auditors to make sure that people are adhering to the processes, that systems are okay, that the outcome of what you are doing is correct. You also have systems that can help you, like management information systems that collect information from all the platforms that you are using. And that gives, and you can put queries on those systems as a CEO, and you can ask, I want to know what was my revenue on Monday morning from 10 to 12. The system would be able to collect that information for you. That's a very simple question, but as you just said, you have tariff packages, you have services, and other actions vis-a-vis, for example, a very large customer, that has a whole range of services. You need to be able to see if those services are delivered and at what quality, at what time, and against what budget. And those systems and people can help you with that.
Absolutely, and I think you've touched on the importance of the operational audit, and as you rightly point out, this is not an issue that just affects telecoms. Any utility, whether it's water, electricity, gas, excuse me, you're actually ensuring that what is being carried at one point is the same as what's being carried at another, and it's the same as what ends up being delivered to the customer and billed. And we know that that's not the case in every case. And I think I told you I had a very good operational auditor who established that our international trunks in one company I was working in were carrying 5 or 6 times the traffic that the switches were carrying. So there was a whole chunk of minutes that was being fed into our network for onward delivery without somebody paying for it, and certainly without us getting any revenue. but so it's partially fraud, but it's also wastage, as you pointed out. There's if you are carrying it and not billing for it, that's a waste of revenue, basically.
And resources.
And resources. And it needn't necessarily be fraudulent either.
No, there can be mistakes in the system themselves. If the raw data records are not read properly by the media gateway, in our case, in the mobile system, then you can just lose 5 to 10% without even knowing it.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That doesn't need to be manual intervention. That could be just a software mistake.
Yeah, or measuring in the wrong position. And yes, and the potential for wastage as opposed for fraud is huge. So both of those things need to be addressed. But again, it comes back to people in the end. Actually understanding what they're doing.
It's always people.
It is. It's always people. That's very true. And I think we're sort of moving across the spectrum of the things to be digitalized, automated, but the necessity of checking and double checking all of the time is clearly, just from this conversation, becomes increasingly important. But moving on to, I touched on this and you did too, about the ability to look at data and interpret what's going on, to design different tariffs, maybe based on time of day or different products, becomes increasingly important, obviously to differentiate yourself, but also to meet customer demand, really. I mean, would you like to say a little bit about the sort of predictive element of what we're talking about here?
The predictive element in the system?
Or forecasting.
Forecasting, yeah. Forecasting is extremely important, of course, because, especially in our world, in a technology world, because you are going to invest quite often hundreds of millions of dollars or euros, whatever you are spending, depending on which supplier you're using. But it is hundreds of millions. And if you spend hundreds of millions and you have no forecast of where you're going, you are totally lost. Yeah? So it is very important to have systems that give you a very good record of what has been done over time. Then you can analyze the trends, and you also have to analyze the trends in the market, of course. It's an analysis that comes from many different angles. And it also depends on the strategy of the company. But all these things together make that you have to make a forecast for the future. What is it that you need? And I call that basically the propagation of a company. Yeah, if I have so many users, then I need so many employees, then I need so many cars, then I need so many computers, then I need so many and network, base stations, switches, hubs, whatever you have. I need so much training. You can basically put all this in ratios. And that is based on the input that must be trustworthy, that you have built up over time, that gives you a trend analysis of what happened. And that trend analysis can be even more detailed than just giving you a round figure. It can also be that there are certain months where you are doing much better because of certain reasons. So I also always want to see also an event calendar, because it's very important to see where the pressure is. Yeah, if everyone calls on his mom on New Year's Eve, then maybe the whole system goes down, which happened in the past. It doesn't happen that much anymore, but it used to happen. There was a lottery on the television, and all the mobile networks just popped out. Yeah, you need to understand what it is that you need for now and for the future. But as I go back to the investment, if I spend $500 million, I need to know if this investment is future-proof, not only in the terms of the sophistication of the technology that you're using, but also in the terms of, is it sufficient? to address the market? Is it sufficient to help the employees to work properly? Is it sufficient to build this company out in the direction that I want to build it? The change from, in the mobile industry, again, from, you know, initially only voice and just a bit later SMS, till today, where we do streaming, where we do constant searching on the internet, where the capacity that is used is mostly data, has shifted the need for the operators and has shifted, you know, the capital investment as well. So there are many, many more reasons today, even more than in the past, to make sure that you understand what are the developments in the future. Yeah, for example, I already said artificial intelligence, but what does that mean? Yeah, what does it mean for the operator internally? How can you use it to the benefit of the company, of course, but also what does it mean in terms of pressure on the network? Does it mean that I have to invest in XYZ more than in the previously the case? Like when we changed from the voice world into the data world, that had a totally different dynamic, of course, than what we are used to. So I think that the task for a CEO definitely is to make sure that you know what's going on and what is 5 years out. If you don't know that, how can you make sensible recommendations to your shareholder for investment? Yeah, so we are learning every day. And still every day, even though I don't, you and I are not managing those operations anymore, but we are still learning every day about what is needed for the future. And you can only do that based on very solid starting point. So then we go back to, you know, what is it that you have in your pocket already today? And can you base your judgment on that? And the judgment is not, I put it in a computer and I just extrapolate it. That's not going to fit. You really have to use your intelligence as a CEO, as a management team, as everyone who is involved in decision making has to do that. That's your task.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what sort of the underlying message that keeps coming through as you speak is accurate data. Accurate data, accurate data. I think it's interesting that time and again you see maybe some of what is measured is accurate. For example, minutes of traffic in a day, but actually the cutoff time at the beginning and the end of the day is not accurate. So you're not measuring a 24-hour period. And you see that every day in the newspapers. Trend analysis, but actually the underlying data is incorrect, which means the conclusions are going to be wrong.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's but it just reiterates all of the time that your underlying processes, data collection, and your operational audit have got to be spot on and reviewed to make sure they continue to be spot on.
And going back to people, pay peanuts, get monkeys. So be very selective in the people who are involved in these processes and in the selection of what you need in the future, any systems, etc. You need to have the best brains to do that, because if you start off with a dodging starting point, you will never get anywhere, and it can be dangerous even. So pay the people who are involved in this quite well, very well, and make sure that you get the best people for this kind of jobs is really very, very, very important.
Yeah, it is. And that, I think it's interesting. We'll come back to this shortly, but I think that's a really important comment in the context of I would say, assumption in the media that artificial intelligence is going to put us all out of work because a machine's going to do it. And
this is not the case.
No, exactly. I have another question. Sorry, go on, Ineke.
I think what is important, though, is that, if we talk about that for a second more, is that the observation that we always had, and I even participated in big discussion panels with all CEOs in the Middle East, for example, about the people. right? Because very often it is the case that we are sort of 100 kilometers further down the road already. Yeah, but the education system is not adapted to it. Sometimes you have situations where the countries are totally focusing on one area because that brings the most money, but they forget that the telecommunications industry is enormous, produces 5% of the GDP worldwide. Yeah, 5%, that's enormous. So it's very important that you not only are aware of what is needed for the company, but you also have to promote your message to the universities, to schools, to everyone who you can talk to. Make sure that you educate the people who will be involved in this very well. So that the starting point is people who understand. Yeah, I'm very willing to put up training centers, done that many times, but the basis should be there. The basis and the capacity to learn and the critical minds that you need to be trained from very young onwards.
Yeah, that's very true. And yeah, okay, I was going to make a comment, but I won't there. We've got another question in here from Krasimir, which is sort of allied to what we're talking about just at this moment. And he's asking is, can mobile, voice and data compete with a triple play, voice, data, TV plus internet? Do you want to make a comment on that?
Yeah, mobile in the sense of mobile, I'm not quite sure if it still exists, because to me it's all a hybrid anyway. Yeah, because what it's more to do with your device. Yeah, so if let's say iPads and tablets and what have you, they have a capability normally of all these things. And if you are using all of them, then I think that the triple play that Krasimir is hinting at is something that everyone wants to have, but also uses. And I'm watching television on my iPad. I'm watching, I'm using my iPad to make phone calls. So it starts to be a hybrid. I'm not quite sure if we can think still in voice and SMS and versus the triple play. I think it all merges together.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think the differentiation in the end becomes, as you say, it's the terminal you're using. The actual capability is broadly the same. I think one thing we haven't really touched on, which has a huge impact, is actually the mobile money. And that, to my mind, that is a huge game changer.
Yes. Especially in, if you look at it from a global perspective, then we have like 8 billion people today, right? But out of the 8 billion people, as I've read in the GSMA, has very good reports on mobile money, by the way, yeah, for people who are interested. But if you look at that, then about 5.5 billion people in this world are unbanked. But still, these 5.5 billion people have a need to make bank transactions. So if you look at a mobile operation, and I think we touched on that already before the book was launched in those webinars, a CEO of a mobile company today is a CEO of a lifestyle company, right? And mobile money being one of the most important things that is on offer. If you look at Kenya is a very good example. In Kenya, 50% of GDP goes via Safaricom and the colleagues. Yeah, so 3 mobile operators, but Safaricom by far the largest. And that is $125 billion per year for you. So if you look at that, then yes, it is not only very important that what you do in terms of voice, data, SMS, etc., is 100% secure. Yeah, and you need to measure that all the time. But also now there's another equation. These are money streams. Yeah. So you are not only dealing anymore with the, let's say, telecoms regulator, you're also dealing with the financial regulators, because you are in fact a bank for the poor. Yeah, the poor who can go to a branch office somewhere and put some money into their mobile wallet, and from that mobile wallet they can pay all kinds of invoices that they have. So the pure money, i.e. the notes, yeah, they are not really necessary anymore in that case. And it changes really the world. It makes it much more easy for people. They don't have to walk from A to B because they can just transfer the money over the phone. Even international, I did a project already back in Haiti, where we had a company in the States that made sure that there was remittance money that was connected to our mobile money platform, and that means that people didn't have to go to Western Union and all his colleagues or MoneyGram or what have you, but they can just go to that company, that new company, deposit money, and then it would be picked up on the mobile phone in Haiti. So, but that remittance money, which is for so many countries so important. Yeah, and if you can then automate the whole process of that, with the approval, of course, of the financial institutions, because that is critical, then you change the world for many people. And I think that is a thing that we really have to, in the Western world, it is a bit different. Because of course, 99% of the people has a bank account, right? So the necessity of transferring money over the mobile was not as urgent. But now, today, you also see that happens all the time, of course, and instantly. So, yes.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Kenya. I was aware the percentage of the GDP or the commerce that runs through mobile money in Kenya, but also I think I'm right in saying that something in excess of 50% of the tax collections by the government are also done through mobile money. So imports and exports going through the docks, mobile money is the method of paying the state. So it has become much more than a lifestyle product. It's actually critical to the running of the country.
Of the economy, yeah.
Yeah, amazing, really. And it's all happened very quickly.
Yes. Yeah, and many more countries now. West Africa is spurting. they are even advancing now, Kenya. So it is a worldwide game, but most importantly in developing countries at the moment. Yeah,
where you can just shortcut a whole range of development.
Yeah, but it's like, it's a bit like the same situation where there was fixed line telecommunications, yeah. And we started with mobile operations. And I remember that in 1995, when I was in the Czech Republic, I mentioned this in my book as well. The consortium was putting $5.5 billion to expand the fixed line network in Prague. And I raised my finger and I said, what about mobile? But most people don't need fixed lines. Today, myself, I don't have a fixed line since 1998 or so. Yeah. So it's the same sort of thing. You have a bank for complicated businesses. Yeah, business transactions, international transactions for large amounts of money. But the mobile money is basically the mobile versus the fixed line. Yeah, mobile money versus the bank. Yeah, it's the same sort of development.
It is, and you just shortcut a whole amount of expenditure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a question here from Disebo. Why did you think it was key to include the topic of processes in this adventure book? Which I think is a really interesting question, because we've actually been talking about processes right from the beginning of this webinar. So do you want to add a few words to that?
Absolutely, because, as I said, when you start building, processes are documented, but not okay. But it is increasingly important, of course, and certainly for the future, to have this all very well documented. And for one reason, I mean, first of all, as I said, replacement of people. It's much easier if you can give a little booklet and say, look, these are the processes that are applicable to you and your job. Yeah. But also because if you automate the processes, there is much less room to manipulate those systems. So it is very important, because in a lot of situations, even though I fully understand that an empty stomach doesn't have a strategy, yeah, but I also understand that there is other ways of solving that problem. So it is a very important point to look at, because you don't want to have groups of people who are starting to, who know this, what is missing, who know how can they manipulate the system or the process, who know, yeah, and then the money walks out of the door without you knowing it. I had quite a few examples of that. So you have to do this no matter what you do. It's prudent, but it is also it is a necessity for a company. You have to make sure that your personnel knows what it's doing, but B, to avoid manipulation, fraud, etc. And that happens.
Yeah, it does. I also think it's interesting in this context as well to look at the evolution, if I can use that word, of the different aspects of telecoms, not just mobiles, but if we go back to the beginning, I think when you started and when I started, there was no such thing as top up. There was no such thing. Actually, we started our first one without a billing system, which was not very bright, but we didn't have any option. But there weren't top-up cards. The only way you could get money into your account was go down to the office, put some money on deposit. And as things have moved on, we're into top-up cards, automatic top-ups, but they're all essentially cash. So the opportunity for fraud, mistakes has just moved. It hasn't disappeared. So it's
yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So coming back to the point about the audit, whether it's financial or operational, they actually start to merge in the end. The audit process it becomes ever more critical. So I think we keep sort of touching on the artificial intelligence. We started within the context of people being the most important asset to the business. And I think, in fact, we just got a question in now, say which process would you substitute by an AI? And I think now is probably a good time to explore a little bit what you think the impact of artificial intelligence is, or will be, and where that is likely to lead us.
Yeah, I think we are at the very beginning of understanding what it is and where we go. But luckily, we are at the beginning that something is now regulated, will be regulated. If you look at the EU, which is far advanced in comparison to the rest of the world, is already issuing regulations, yeah, and what can be done and what can't be done, what is allowed and what's not allowed, yeah. Because of course, as we started to say, with any digitized project that you do, the starting point means rubbish in, rubbish out. Yeah, with artificial intelligence, this is even more important, because these systems are self-learning. They are using neural models and they are filling in gaps. But if the starting point is not correct, the gaps are filled in the wrong way as well, right? So we get answers and directions from those systems that are totally incorrect. So there is another aspect to it that, you know, quite often models are built on existing models. So if you have parts and parcels and you make that building blocks, yeah, and now I am not a specialist at all, but if I look at it from the logical part and I have 5 parts and I'm adding 2 parts, does that mean that I have 7 parts, or do I have 6 parts and a faulty? Yeah, so these things mean in my book, yes, you can use them, but start very small. Start with 100% control over what's happening. Start with the best minds, yeah, who have an understanding of what it means, and do that together with the management team of a company, because these people need to know where we're going. right? They need to know what is the input, what has been the input for this, and what is the output, and is this logic in my book? And everyone can say, okay, it's logic or not logic, but the task, and that's why we had a topic, management judgment, the task of the management, especially the CEO, is to put the intellectual cap on and think about it, right? Most decisions you have to take, because you have hundreds of millions of decisions to take, can be decisions based on your experience, and you can do that very, very fast. But using artificial intelligence means that you really have to spend time on it and follow it step by step. And if you're constantly following it, you can also put your trust in it, or maybe say, no, this is not the direction that I was thinking of, so maybe we don't do that. Yeah, we do it in a different way. But that it is coming, and that it will be a part of your competitive toolkit is sure. Yeah, and the question that I think it was Nino who asked this question. Hi, Nino. Where would I begin? Starting customer care, when you start with simple sales processes towards just single customers, not like your biggest customer, yeah, but start simple. Start with pilots. Look at the pilots and say, okay, this can be replaced by the artificial intelligence tool that I have developed. And yes, maybe that overtakes some manual work, or people who are normally doing the job, but there will be more jobs and different jobs that we can't even think of today yet. So I don't think that this is a huge threat, to be honest. I think it's a huge opportunity, but you have to be very careful, because if you look at, for example, reports that McKinsey is publishing now very often, and there's, by the way, a webinar that I sent it to you, Gavin, a webinar about that, on Monday. So if you look at McKinsey, who really puts a lot of its eggs in this basket, then you can follow that properly and also be aware of what risks, because they will be listing them for you. Yeah, so you have to learn constantly and see for the future how you can use it. But to answer the question, start with simple processes to replace those first.
Yeah, I think as you say, it inevitably is going to be part of the toolkit of management. It's not going to disappear. But clearly, to me, you and I have touched on it outside of the webinar, but clearly the control by management is critical before it just disappears out of control.
Yeah.
And I think for me, a sort of relatively small error in definition at the input stage can lead to quite catastrophic results for some people. And that's, management cannot afford, in my opinion, this is my opinion, cannot afford to relinquish control to something it doesn't understand fully.
No. And that's why it is so important that the EU immediately started to think about regulation. And that's why it is so important that the CEO of these artificial intelligence companies in the States are now talking to Congress and Senate and and all kinds of work groups to make sure that everyone understands. It's also important to understand that Elon Musk, one of the developers, says, let's take it a bit slowly. Yeah. So if that is the case, then we cannot go to the cowboy country that we have on the internet currently, whereby the EU had to say at one point, and again, there's a story in the book about that, but how people were basically slaughtered on the internet by posting false information. And the EU was the first one who introduced by its ruling that people have the right to be forgotten. You can't just put whatever and it has to stay there forever. No. Yeah, data protection for the consumer is extremely important. And that went, in my book, out of hand. So it's very good that we have now that the virtual world will have regulations just like the physical world. Very important.
It is, and it has to. And I think this is not, to my mind, The basis of what I'm about to say is the same, although the subject matter isn't. There has been a lot of hype around cryptocurrencies over the past few years. And the question came up in the UK, I'm not quite sure when, but the question of how cryptocurrencies should be regulated. And the body that was set up to have a look at it has just reported back to Parliament, I think, to say that in their opinion, cryptocurrencies are not a suitable subject for financial regulation. Actually, they should be regulated under the betting laws, which I thought that's interesting. So somebody has stepped right back and say, this is just betting. This is not a serious attempt to replace sovereign currencies. I'm not saying I agree. I just thought it was very interesting.
Well, yeah, anyway. Attempts that were done by the big tech companies are put on hold. And I think that the big tech companies nowadays understand much better that there needs to be protection. We are now venturing in a different area, of course, but it is important to note that the physical world and the virtual world should give you the same protection. And that is not the case.
Not yet, no.
And that is dangerous. That's plain dangerous. And then coming back to AI, for example, bad input is bad output, but unilateral input is also bad output, because if the input is only done by, sophisticated white males, then they forget about 75% of the world, right?
Yeah.
Because 50% female and the rest is even more probably, is from a different background. Now, you have to make sure that all these systems are representing the society as is. Otherwise, you will produce outcomes that are not good. And examples of that are already there. Profiling, for example. If you profile people at the border, this is something that the EU wants now to stop. Cannot be done. Face recognition built on artificial intelligence, i.e., bits and pieces of the pixels are missing and you will fill them in with your new system, doesn't mean that face is the face that you need. It could be with someone else because there's a mistake. So all these things are really, really important. And the EU, luckily, says, "Oh, stop! We need to do this."
Yeah, and that vigilance has got to continue. Because we're talking about artificial intelligence today, that will develop. There'll be something in the future. So basically, it's the framework for control that we're talking about.
Absolutely,
And we all I can say, we're getting towards the end now, Ineke, of our time. So thank you to everybody for participating. But I think I would just like to encourage people who haven't already taken the opportunity to read your book, because it's not only the content, that it's also the stimulation of thought processes, which is basically what we are exploring on the webinars. We're taking your book as the base, but we're moving quite a long way beyond it now, which can only be right. And of course, both Ineke and I are available to assist anybody in their business journeys.
Yes, definitely. And thank you for referring to the book again, because it is a bit of it was a choice to the management lessons in the book, are sort of, on the way. They appear and it is not spelled out as this is your management lesson at all. But the webinars, of course, make an attempt to do that. The book is an adventure.
Yes.
And an adventure book of someone who traveled the world, and not about me. It's my observations of how this world developed. So you will not find my private life in there, or at least very, very little. That was never the intention of the book. So the feedback that I get on the book is really, really nice, because people say it's a very interesting, very fast way of learning how this industry developed over the years and who were involved in that. And one reason I've mentioned it before, I think, was to say thank you to all those people, who put that in place. And basically, no one has done that before. This is a first. So I hope the first attempt is to your liking. And give us feedback, please. Amazon review, please. That would be very, very, very nice. But, and again, Gavin and I are there to help out with management problems, if you will, challenges that we are discussing in these webinars. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, Ineke, thank you very much indeed. Another enjoyable hour has just flown past. And we're definitely exploring stuff that I feel is pushing our envelopes as well as the people who are listening. So this is all valuable stuff. So unless anybody's got any other questions that we could briefly deal with, I think we've come pretty much to an end, Ineke.
Yes, and the next one is in June, of course.
It is.
And the invitations will go out soon.
Okay, Ineke.
Okay,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Gavin, as always. And thanks everyone participating. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.